Hey everyone, welcome back. Are you using reference tracks when you mix? If not, you should be, and I'm going to give you 3 reasons why. So let's get into it. But first, don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. It would really help support the channel. So basically what a reference track is kind of how it sounds. It's a track that you reference while you're mixing or you're recording so you can achieve a better sound. However, there's some hidden benefits to this that I think really pay dividends and can get your mixes sounding better faster. So the first thing reference tracks do for you is it helps to train your ear. So if you listen to enough recordings and you do enough recordings yourself, you kind of notice, some differences between your recordings and then the recordings that you listen to, and you try to bridge that gap. So if you listen to a recording that has a ton of reverb and yours maybe doesn't, you learn how to compensate and you listen to the reference track for the amount of reverb and things like that. Or likewise, you listen how it's mic'd. Mostly you can tell like how close the guitar is mic'd, or if it's mic'd far away, if it's more ambient, is it a very more intimate sound, something like that. And the more you listen to reference tracks and do your own recordings, you really kind of get a feel for, where you can put a mic to get a certain sound. And when I record other people or I mix other people's projects, kind of like I'm doing right now, basically what I do is I ask people like, who are some of your favorite artists? Who are some of your favorite albums, recordings, things like that? So I kind of get a loose idea of what to shoot for. Now, if I'm not recording it myself, I'm a little bit limited. But if I am recording it, I kind of can get an idea of like, okay, they like, close mic'd, or maybe they like a really open ambient sound or something like that. And the more you do this, you really get to train your ear, and it makes your recordings better because you can just go to that kind of magic mic placement faster without having to waste too much time experimenting. So my second tip I kind of briefly mentioned earlier, and that's using a reference track to kind of help you along with reverb and EQ choices. So if you're not in like the most acoustically perfect space, maybe like a bedroom or something like that, and you don't have a lot of acoustic treatment, it can be kind of hard to hear what you're doing with EQ and whether or not your mixes translate when you play them on different stereo speakers or in your car or something. And if you actually listen to a reference track, you kind of get a better idea of like, okay, my mix is muddy, my mix is too bright, things like that, but you can also listen to the reverb. And as classical guitarists, when you're recording, reverb is such a huge part of the recording process. So, if you listen to something that has too much ambience or not enough ambience, or, you're trying to fine tune it to your own personal tastes, if you use a reference track, you kind of have something to shoot for. So that way you don't like overload the reverb and then you listen to it back and you're like, oh man, I sound like I'm in the middle of a well. This is bad. And then you can kind of adjust it to taste. Using a reference track is just probably one of the fastest ways to, get your mix sounding kind of record ready, as opposed to just kind of fiddling and then you listen to something else on Spotify and you're just like, man, my recording just doesn't sound as good. Well, if you use a reference track, you can just do like an A-B comparison and go like, why doesn't my track sound as good? And you can actually take some steps to get there. Rather than, kind of spinning your wheels and just getting frustrated, when you pull in a reference track, you can kind of almost quantify what your mix needs and then kind of mix to that. So my last tip is kind of a huge one, and it's probably the most requested one that I've had. And I've even made a video on this before, how to raise your mix's volume. Now this kind of goes along the same lines, but if you use a reference track, you actually have something a little more concrete to shoot for as far as like volume goes. So most classical guitarists, when they record, usually have a really annoying problem where when you listen to it against the reference track is so much louder. And just the way your ears work and like the whole Fletcher-Munson curve and science and stuff, anything that's louder just sounds better. Anything that's, has more decibels will sound like it has more highs, more lows, and just be better in every way. So when your track kind of goes out there and you want people to listen to it, either on YouTube or Facebook or something, or on Spotify, to a lesser extent, you want to kind of match the volume competitively. Now, in this day and age, most tracks get kind of auto-leveled and volume really isn't that big of a deal, but you also don't want your track to be just like a really anemic little blip on the radar. You kind of want to match it more or less to what everybody else does. So you can pick a reference track, listen to it, and then, watch a few of my other videos. I've got one on using a limiter, my mastering tutorial. I also have another one on just kind of my one-click solution, and I'll link those down below. But basically, you can use those to fine-tune more or less how loud your track should be. So that way it's not like insanely loud to where it just sounds bad, but it's also not super quiet to where nobody can hear it and you have to just like crank your volume. And then it just kind of annoys people because they have to keep doing this. And then when something else comes on YouTube, you just blow their head out of the water and it's just like, oh, it's terrible. But those are my 3 biggest tips. And I really can't emphasize how much using reference tracks really does help your progress you know, as a recording artist and then as a mixer, and it just gets you to where you want to be faster. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, or topics you want me to cover in future videos like this one, please leave them in the comments down below. I'll see you guys in the next video.